Okay.
Executive session.
Well, I'm going to have a board meeting. I'll talk to you later. Love you too.
Okay.
Well, I think I do have.
Someone cancels. I like the new surfaces.
I am on, you're judging,
Well,
I learned
I
how.
love my iPad that I have,
Yeah,
but
you do.
there are some things about when I really need to dive in and work,
need
that
that.
working on this surface
Thank
is
you.
different in such that,
Yeah,
I don't know,
yeah.
it's just, I like it.
I think it's great.
This is, I mean, it's a fast computer for the iPad.
Yeah,
I don't think keep up with the office software.
yeah, right.
Do you have everything on one thing? Or you do different iPads and this and desktop?
I try not to do any, but I got this, my office, and my phone.
Okay.
Okay, Larry? We'll call the planning meeting of the Lee County Board of Education to order. Dr. Miller, you provide our invocation for us, please.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity to gather. Pray that you would guide us with your wisdom as we do business on behalf of the students in this community. I pray that you would support and be with the Deerfield family and the loss of Mr. W.T. Henry. And I also ask that you have your hand of blessing on all those gathered here tonight. Praise things in Christ's name. Amen.
All right, we have the agenda before you on your computer as well as, well, we will have other copies tonight. What is the pleasure of the board as it relates to the agenda? We can adopt it by consent, if that's okay with everyone. Okay. Moving on to the discussion and action items, Mr. Kelly, I believe, has a budget forecast for us.
Dr. Miller asked me to put together something on what the impact of the governor's $3,000 raise for teachers. And this is kind of just shot in the dark of what we got right now. And right now we have 487 and a half certified positions, of which state funds fund, and that state being the QBE and pre-K, 450. So we got 37.3 certified positions that are basically locally, federally funded. So if you take those local positions and multiply them times $3,000, you're at $111,000, about $112,000. So they don't pay the TRS on those positions, and that's going up to 21%. So we have $23,000 of that. And QBE does not pay anything for FICA for any position, so all of our positions we have to pay the FICA of the $3,000 increase. So basically you're looking at a $250,000 increase in local funds just for a state teacher pay increase of $3,000. Now we hope that the digest growth will offset that, but at this point I don't know. But I mean that's totally based on the current positions we have, because I haven't forecast what positions we're going to have for the upcoming budget.
The FICA tax is as much as the total increase?
Okay, let's call this on all teachers. The first two numbers are just on the 37 positions we fund locally.
Okay.
So every teaching position would have to pay the FICA on. That's just preliminary. We're into it and watching the, as they change, and it may change.
And this is only certified positions?
This is certified,
He's also proposed a 2% raise for certain non-certified.
non-certified.
Right.
And I didn't do the projections on that because there's one class in there that we're looking at something else. I mean, it may even be more than 2%. So for bus drivers, I know the shortage that we have with bus drivers, but the paraprofessionals, 2%, probably 20 grand or so $1 million, I think total line item is $1 million.
So there'll be in addition above this, potentially the 250, this still has to go through the legislature and be approved by them, but this is the governor's
And
proposal.
it's a flat 3,000, it's not a percentage.
That's my understanding of it. I called the Department of Education to see if it was a $3,000 increase on like a T4 no experience, and then it flowed through with the percentage difference from each step, which could be more than 3,000 at the end. And the Department of Ed doesn't have enough information to know. All they know is 3,000 times the number of teachers in their budget that the state has. So
His
that
words last
sounds like,
night were 3,000.
huh?
His words last night were 3,000.
So to me, it sounds like each step would get increased by 3 exact
And who would
thousand.
you know? It would be closer to the end of the session before you would know. They don't vote on the budget until.
They don't vote on the budget till later, but the Department of Ed will start putting out some preliminary numbers probably, and maybe late February, early March. But they don't have, what they have is the total budget, and they don't have how it's gonna be broken down into cubic. They rework the formula every year to make it work, so anyway.
And also, we'll meet beginning next month, we'll sit down with each principal and director to forecast and
That-
plan ahead for positions for next year. And that'll help us have a little better understanding of that.
Y'all have any questions, though?
Anybody have any questions? Mr. Kelly? All right, Dr. Miller, next on the list for school system updates.
Well, I would like to share with the board some system updates. Jennifer sent you an email with a PowerPoint for this presentation. I used the presentation from last year's Eggs and Issues to build this presentation for tonight, which is really an update on some data related to our school system. So if you don't mind, I'm going to step over here to do this part. We have 6,526 students as of last Friday, and we're continuing to grow as a system, and we are excited about what all has occurred in our school system. And looking back to 2018, we had a great year, a lot of accomplishments. We were able to reduce class size through the millage rate increase, in particular in kindergarten, where we had seen a spike in students that were not being successful. And we wanted to target that, and we were able to do so, adding positions in primary and elementary school. We increased instructional support with the addition of an instructional supervisor at each middle school, and we think that's going to really pay great dividends for us down the road as we have somebody focusing on instruction at that level. And then we also added a K-5 instructional specialist specifically in the area of literacy. And she's doing a great job. We improved school safety by adding 2 school resource officers. That has been a wonderful blessing for us, for our schools. They're very involved. They serve all the schools, but they are located at the 2 middle schools, the 9th grade and the high school. But they do serve every campus. I was at one of the primary schools this afternoon. The SRO was at that school. And they,
I know Anthony and Perry,
they're Officer Barnhill and
Herndon.
yes, Officer Herndon. And they're very personable, very much. If you go at middle school at lunchtime, either of the middle schools, they're very engaged with the students. The children have responded well to them, and they help out also at high school events. We had a big game Friday night with Coffee County for first place in the region, and they were there as well. So they serve the whole system. They're not just sited on that one campus. We've also addressed school safety in 5 of our 10 schools. We've improved the safety in the office reception area. Lee Primary School's a good example. They, you know how open, you just came in, it was very open desk area, and we built some windows and made it safer and less accessible for anybody who might want to intrude on that campus, but also it still works well with serving our public's needs and parents as they come in to that school. We did a similar thing at Lee County Middle School East, and again closed off that area so that it is glass and people can't just walk right into the office as they could in the past. We did very well in our advanced ed accreditation review. Our score from a few years ago was in the 250 range, and we scored in the 330 range this most recent review, which is a credit to our teachers and school principals. And our students, they performed very, very well, and we're really proud of that. We're one of the top systems in Georgia in terms of academics, extracurricular activities, financial efficiency, and school climate. And I'm going to show you the data to support that statement. That's just not me bragging. I do think we can back this up with some data. I also want to call attention to the outstanding graduates we had. We moved the graduation to the Civic Center and went beautifully. That was very well handled by the high school. We had the largest graduating class in the history of Lee County. I think we're going to surpass that with this upcoming class. Outstanding group of students who are being very successful in college, going to some of the best schools in America. Case in point, this is the Georgia Tech game from last Saturday. And I'm sorry, Ms. Ford and Ms. Lane, but there's some Georgia Tech fans dressed as Duke.
There's gold under that blue.
I heard that. I did hear that, but the four you can't, doesn't really show up here well. That's Justin Creamer and Emma Keaton and a young man named Will Lang. I don't know if you know him.
It was like he's wearing one.
He is, and Justin so Justin and Will go to Justin Creamer and Will go to Tech, and they drove to Duke for the Georgia Tech Duke game. Spent the night in Shesheskyville, camped out, got into the game, but they had to wear their blue to sit in the Duke student section. I heard there's a picture on social media of Will doing the crazy hands at one of the Tech players. Perhaps he was sending good vibes.
Benedict Arnold in my house.
So, but I think this is a great picture. One of the parents sent it to me this weekend of our kids doing well in the world. And we have kids at many schools: Albany State, Georgia Southwestern, Georgia, LSU, Auburn, representing our school system and doing great things. Many children who went directly to the military or are studying at Albany Tech. Very proud of our graduates, and I think that is a great testimony to the strength of our school system. Last Monday was a celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, and he said intelligence plus character, that's the goal of true education. And I think these students certainly represent that, and the ones following behind them. I've used the words for our mission, learning, encouraging, and excelling, to want to share some data with you. CCRPI is Georgia's measure for how well schools prepare students. Each school improved in their achievement score on CCRPI. We're one of the top 20 school systems of Georgia's 181 public schools based on our district CCRPI score. They give a single score for the whole district. And we're one of only 5 systems below Macon in the top 20. When you look at the large systems, those are considered school systems with more than 5,000 students, of which we're one. We were 12th of the 62 large systems, and we had the highest CCRPI scores in our RESA district again this year. So we're very proud of that, proud of our students' commitment and our teachers' leadership that we're seeing in the schools. We have work to do. We can improve on CCRPI. We are working hard to do that, to make sure that we're meeting the needs of each and every student who comes through our doors. But we can do better, and we will do better. Encouraging school climate rating. School climate, the National School Climate Center defines school climate as the quality and the character of school life. The school climate rating provided by the Governor's Office of Student Achievement is based on data from surveys of students, parents, and teachers. office discipline referral data and student attendance, and they have a formula that they use, and they enter all this data. And I am very proud to say that all 8 schools received the highest rating of 5 stars. One of only 4 school systems in Georgia to accomplish that. The other 3 are Bacon County and Alma, Fannin County, which is up in Blue Ridge, and then Pelham City, right down the road from us. So we're one of the top school systems in the state in terms of school climate, outperforming Oconee County, Forsyth County, Beaufort City. That is really, really good. Very proud of that score that we have for school climate. Number 1 rated system in South Georgia. I put an asterisk by it because Pelham City, they also had 5 stars for each of their 3 schools. I know Mr. Floyd Fort would probably differ with me on that. He'd probably say they're number 1. And that's a great testimony to that school system as well. But we have a lot to be proud of in the school climate rating. Mr. Dowling is always reminding our leaders and our teachers, it's all about relationships. It's about building the rapport and earning the trust of students. And he's constantly holding that out in front of our leaders, and I think they're responding there. We are a model for other school systems regarding school climate because of our work with 7 Mindsets, which is a social emotional learning program, and PBIS. We are, our 9th grade students were invited to present at the state PBIS conference for the 2nd year in a row this past year, and that was a great honor. And we have worked closely with 7 Mindsets to roll out that program as well to help us improve school climate. Excelling. The financial efficiency star rating, again from the Governor's Office of Student Achievement, we have 12, 8, 6, 2, and 1. There are 12 school systems that had a score of 4.5 stars or higher. The financial efficiency school rating is based on per pupil expenditure and CCRPI, student performance. So those 2 are the metrics they use. We were the 8th best system in terms of the average per pupil expenditure. They averaged the last 3 years and rank you. And so out of the 181 school systems, we were number 8 in that category. We were the 6th lowest per pupil expenditure of all school systems in Georgia. Very interesting data. If you have an opportunity, I would encourage you to go to this website and download the Excel file. I know that may be, you may not want to look at the Excel file, but if you could get on there and look at the data, the lowest per pupil expenditure is right under $7,000. We're about $7,400. There are school systems that go all the way up to $14,000 per pupil. And that's not a criticism of that school system. Those are typically small systems where they have very few students, and when you hire a superintendent, a principal, a transportation director, a football coach, and you've only got a few hundred students, that really skews the numbers.
Is that M&O expenses, or does that include capital expenditures too?
It has your federal, your local, and your state, and it looks at all 3 of those as a broad category. I don't think they break it down as far as the maintenance and operation.
I was just wondering if it
No
was
capital outlay or
No
or
capital
debt
outlay
service.
there? Okay,
Right.
okay.
Right. We had the 2nd lowest per pupil average among large systems. Bryan County, which is Richmond Hill, outperformed us. Richmond Hill, we played them in football 2 years ago, and in basketball last year. They are building a brand new, about a $90 million high school. It was donated, the land for it, I understand, was given to them by Raytheon or some corporation like that, which has a manufacturer in place there, and they are just booming. They're a suburb of Savannah. Good school system. But we're the number 1 rated school system for financial efficiency. And what I like about these numbers, when you look at financial efficiency, we are doing about as well as we could do. Last year, when we had the millage increase and we had the hearings, one of the people who came said, well, can't we do better? Can't we? And I said, well, I mean, we might could go from 8 to 7, but that's about it. Because of the demographics and the circumstances that we operate under, we are about as efficient. And that's a testimony to Dr. Clay and Dr. Walters and Gary's hard work, and to our teachers, because they are the ones that are making it happen in the classroom, and because we're doing well in the classroom, we are a good return on investment of educational dollars. And I think this is very important for our system going forward. We want to be good stewards. We want to make sure that we are doing right by financial efficiency. I shared with you the audit of school accounts while we're under this topic. And you have those if you want to pull that up and look. Each year, Gary Kelly conducts an internal audit of each account for each school. When I was a principal, Gary would do this for the school I was principal of, and we recently completed that, and you see that data in front of you, and you have a list of the different accounts under the school, and you can see the receipts versus what they paid out. And I can answer any questions, or Gary could, if you have any questions about that.
Who makes the decisions about how this money is spent? I know they do.
Principals?
The principal?
Yes, ma'am, the
Okay.
principals primarily make the decision.
Okay.
And now, a program within the school obviously would,
Like a
Like-
teacher needed something and she could go to the principal and ask,
yes, ma'am.
okay, to be taken from that fund.
And I will say this is something I've always admired about Lee County when I was a teacher and then later as assistant principal and principal, was that if you need a pencil sharpener or a new chair, the Lee County has always been very good about that. And that's not the case in all school systems. We try to make sure that our teachers have the resources they need, and we do it. I think the system has done a good job of that in years past. And Mr. Kelly's a big part of that because of his work. He budgets in such a way so that we can make sure we're meeting the needs that we need to meet. Now, do we have everything we need? No. And the schools will tell you that, but the principals make decisions at the school level. Now, under that, say the high school, if you have a sport or a program, they are making those decisions about how that money's spent.
Do they? Oh, no.
No, go ahead.
Do they have a budget in addition to what they raise? Do they have a budget from the school system and in addition to what they raise? No, what they raise is what they have.
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
I mean,
Well, we pay like for a sport, we pay the salary of the teacher / coach, and we
Okay,
pay
yeah,
their
that's-
supplement,
I understand.
and then we usually pay for transportation, facility needs that they might have. But, as far as buying equipment, like a baseball bats or
Referees.
basketballs or paying referees, that's either paid out of the gate or out of their fundraising.
So these receipts, are they gate receipts?
Not all. I mean, it depends on each category that you have in there. And Donna, if y'all could flip to the elementary school, you could tell them better on the elementary school, whatever one of those accounts on the elementary school, the money that flows through those. But it's concessions, and you have some of it is students pay in a fee to participate in the sport. But
Specifically in high school sports, it gets a little different than the younger schools, but there's, I had a few questions on that. There's no concessions when you get a high school sport. No,
it's going into the sport itself.
so each sport has their own and keeps that money.
And some of the booster clubs will take concessions.
And if I'm looking at this right, as if it were my checking account, and I don't know that, but girls, softball, swimming, and wrestling, and soccer seem the most profitable of the sport.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, the parents of the girls softball contribute a lot.
No, I agree. I'm just saying they seem to be the most profitable, even though we got one that generates $500,000.
You're talking about ending balance.
Well, that's what matters at the end of the day, is it not?
Because
It doesn't.
expenditures is where you benefit the students. So that's.
Well, I don't see that, but that's what I asked for, is a list of the expenditures, because I'd like to see where.
So it's hard to look at this and think of ending balance as profitability.
No, I get that,
Because,
but that's what we need to see is what's in that list of expenses. I understand football helmets and all that's expensive.
You can I can get a detail from any of those from the school. The school, those are by account. So I just asked the school to run a detail of what was the expenditures for that one. each one of those have a code for like 800, 801. Each one of those accounts is a fund in itself that they can pull up. So, I mean, if you wanna know what's spent in each one, you can do that easily.
Most of what they spend it on is uniforms, travel,
Yeah.
hotels,
And
Referees.
referees.
And sometimes if
They
there's,
feed the,
sometimes if there's a bigger balance in the end, then they know they've got a pretty big outlay coming up at the beginning of the next year, for instance. Softball, we've got this money, but we know we need netting, we know we've got uniforms, so you'll see some variance there. I think football is about normal, hadn't it been typically what comes in goes out, and particularly with the extra 5 in the
For the
last
most
2
part,
years,
yeah.
the playoffs,
There's
that
been-
plays into it.
well, see, in softball,
You
they
do-
buy a meal. Every
Yeah.
away game, every one of those children get a meal at every away game. In basketball, none of those children get a meal.
Yeah, and I help cook it, weekly with the football team. I mean, I'm sure that's expensive too. I'm just trying to figure out, I mean, I'd just like to see where $563,000 goes.
One of them, you football?
Yeah.
A lot of them went to rings, and,
That'd be like 40,000.
but I can,
We can give you a breakdown of that, but when you're talking about a sport with 140 children,
Oh, no,
times,
I'm,
you know,
I get it.
helmets are pretty expensive. What do they cost,
But-
Mr. Dowling?
Couple hundred.
Few hundred
$100,
apiece.
right? So, and we do sometimes help with equipment. It's typically in a startup. For example, we have a brand new track. We haven't had a track, so we need to buy the proper equipment that they require for pole vault and shot
100,000.
put.
But why didn't we have a
So-
track? Why don't we have it? I thought we had it.
Well,
We
that's
didn't
not
have
that track wasn't official. We could not host events there. So we've not hosted a track meet in many years. So obviously we have the equipment for kids to practice with, but actually have a competition and put out,
Honestly,
hurdles and
you
such.
didn't have a whole lot of that.
no, so we,
Hurdles, they didn't.
right, and so sometimes we as a system can help out. It was typically in a startup, but the day-to-day operations, when I was the basketball coach, I took over the program and we were in debt because of some uniforms that were bought. So we worked real hard to get out of debt, and we finished positive, but we did do things like purchase, warm-up tops or meals for the students. The theater program at Twin Oaks, they take in a pretty good bit of money, but all that money goes to costumes, Joanne Fabrics, Walmart. It costs a great deal to put on a production, and so sometimes as the principal, I might help with something that would benefit the whole school, not just theater, maybe a microphone or something. And that is a case where the school would help out, because everybody can use that microphone, not just the theater.
My last question would be on the transfer. I'm curious. Is that where Coach Fabrizio pays the wrestling team to do security, and then he transfers money from one fund to another
No account can
fund?
end the year with a negative balance. So some of they transfer money from some accounts to zero out some that have deficit spending.
Transferring from where though?
They're all different. You see them on there from
Yeah,
each.
most of the transfers you see is wrestling did concessions for JV football games.
So that's the coach
They
paying that
transfer money.
organization for.
Soccer did,
Okay, that's
ticket sales, they transfer money over.
that's what I thought.
And the smaller schools transfer it from their general funds, and that's like the fall pictures, the spring pictures, any fundraisers, those type of things, the big fundraiser. Are the schools still paying transportation costs with the buses, and what is the
For
situation?
field trips.
Oh, no, on
Yeah.
field trips, and the bus drivers, are they able to, is that been a problem, getting bus drivers to take the students on field trips?
The problem is if that field trip is during the route time, we don't have enough drivers to drive the routes. We can take you to a field trip if you go after school routes and you're gonna get back before school routes start in the afternoon, but if it interferes with that, it's gonna have to be a sport. And sometimes we have to, that's why we bought those buses.
The sports are taking hits too.
that's, and we'll talk about that, before we're finished, but that is a need that we have as a system. Since you brought up transportation, when the economy does well, school systems struggle to find bus drivers. It's not just a Lee County issue, it's a state and a national issue. And so we are working hard to try to correct the situation. I had a meeting today with the transportation director. We had 2 drivers we thought were gonna be ready to go, but they were sick and unable to make it. And we obviously don't expect anybody who's not well to drive. But that puts us in a situation where we're short. We are working on hiring some additional personnel to get them into the rotation of driving buses. But right now, the situation we're in, the transportation director, Ms. Angie Balcom, the driver trainer, Ms. Letitia Biggs, and some of the mechanics are having to spell drivers. We learned today of a driver had a medical issue. They're going to be out the rest of the year. And it's not their choice; they couldn't help it. But we're having a hard time with that. And to answer Ms. Ford's question, like Mr. Kelly said, if there's a field trip, it has to be within the school line, and most of them are. But when it's a bigger trip, say to Atlanta or something like that, sometimes the schools will charter a bus and defray the costs over time to make that happen. So we do try to help out as much as we can, but it's a challenge. We hope these new mini buses will help us with the athletics. As the spring sports started, we saw the tennis players out there practicing when you came in today.
Looked good to see that crowd out there.
Yes, very good to see
My
that
daughter's
crowd.
on.
Yep, me too. And golf and soccer, and so some of the smaller sports is where these mini buses will help us out. And also,
I noticed tennis is not on this list at the high school. Are they carried somewhere else as far as a?
I think it's at 9th.
they're at 9th grade. Their coach is a teacher at 9th grade, so they're under that.
And the football, again, I'm not harping on football
Yes,
by any
sir.
means. I'm just using it as a big category. It's zeroed at basketball too. They're zeroed out middle school. That means they all fall under the high school umbrella. Okay,
Most of the time,
because they're all zeroed in the middle schools.
yeah, we,
Softball's kind of.
years ago, we
middle school
tried to
softball,
create it.
softballs.
we tried to create a program, a 6 through 12 program, and so in most cases, it still stays that way. There are a few cases where they split, but that's not often.
Baseball's that way. Baseball's a centralized.
Just paying for
fund,
everything.
and
Right.
You'll see the transfers moving.
Looking ahead, we I just want to say this to the board. I don't think we've peaked. We've not reached our D+ Ultra. Our best days are ahead of us. The success we've enjoyed has been wonderful. It is a blessing, but I think it means it's time to roll up our sleeves and go to work to continue this. We have a strong foundation, a history, a legacy of being successful. I like to think of the Lee County school system as a high reliability organization, like they talk about hospitals or the people that fly the jets off the aircraft carriers. You have to know what you're doing. You have to be precise, and you have to be consistent to make sure it's safely done and people are okay. And I think we have done a lot to make that happen. That's something we were talking with our principals this past week. We began a principal academy to help all of us, including the district office leaders, improve as instructional leaders. I was a school administrator for 17 years, but I never had anybody train me or teach me how to be an effective instructional leader. I learned a lot from our teachers and from working with great leaders. But we want to be intentional about that, and that's something that we started. We do that because we endeavor to meet the needs of each and every student in our schools, and that's I think our goal and mission that we have to do. When a child comes through our doors, we want to take care of them and make sure that we're doing right by them. Part of that, excuse me, will be addressing transportation needs. We have some plans in place for next year. We're trying to get through this time of right now where we seem to be stretched to our limits. we are working hard on that, and I think the things that we can put in place for next year will help us be successful. We want to continue to enhance our teaching and learning. We are so blessed. We have some of the best teachers anywhere. The one area I think we need to look at in the future is considering the grading and assessment, and I believe that's something that we've not tackled as a system. We've done it at individual levels, but to look towards how we can prove that. And that's not going to be an easy thing because it gets down to the bare essentials of what we believe about teaching. And I think it's something, though, that we should consider as a system moving forward. And I believe if it's driven by our teachers and facilitated by the leaders we have, we can make some strides in that area. Not looking at making any major changes, just to codify and make consistent how we evaluate student learning. We want to improve the student-teacher ratio. We went a long way towards addressing this past year, but we still have some class size issues. We think we're going to continue to face that. As long as we do a good job, people are still going to continue to move here for our schools, and so we're always going to be striving to improve this. But in particular, we addressed kindergarten last year and elementary school, but we need to also consider our other primary, elementary, and middle school grades. I think if you go to the middle schools, they're sitting right at about 30 in the class, and that's not terrible, but it could be more ideal.
But you've got that mid student that's kind of hung out right now. You've got your accelerated students,
Right.
you've got your low, and it's kind of that middle that's really needs that moment.
And that's part of meeting the needs of every child. Every child that we have is important, and we've got to make sure that we're touching them and shaping them the way that we can to ensure strong learning. Building and sustaining strong extracurricular programs, I think that's a big part of learning is what goes on outside of the classroom as well as in the classroom. We'll take care of the classroom first. Learning, we may be number one in football, but learning will always be number one in Lee County. And we want to have the best in the classroom, but also in the theater and the athletic fields. We want to make sure that we're providing the best resources and the best materials and the best opportunities for our students. And I think we've gone a long way towards doing that. These tennis courts, our new track, those things are really going to add to the life of our school system. And as I said, we want to continue to be a high reliability organization. The definition of that is an organization with systems in place that make them exceptionally consistent in accomplishing their goals. And I hope that moving forward, I can sit down with each of you to discuss these ideas or thoughts, as we need to be thinking towards the future of the system and making sure that we're doing everything we can to address our students' needs. Do y'all have any questions?
The grading teachers, is that what you're talking about, grading teachers or grading?
Student
Student.
grading, teaching and learning. Many years ago, we moved to a standard-based grading system in our primary schools, but it never, Ms. Ford and I were elementary principals, and we were next. We were going to start that out, and then that's about the time the economy crashed. I'm not saying that's the answer. I think this needs to be driven by our teachers,
Are you
but making sure that we're consistent with.
Are you leaning more toward the standards or going
No,
back to
no,
them,
ma'am.
or are you just trying to explore?
I think that needs to come from the schools, not from me or us. I think that's something that we need to consider, the whole thing, not any particular method of doing it.
Are we allowed to, I guess we are, under the strategic waiver contract that we have with the state, as long as we reach the goals that we have as far as performance for CPR, BI improvements and those kind of things, it's up to us.
And consistency, I think, is important. I think that's the word we use a lot in our system, but make sure that what's going on in the school is consistent between between classes, within grades, and between schools, so that there's, and I think our teachers do a good job of that. I'm not questioning them on that. It's just that I think this will be one step to look at as a system.
I know that, kindergarten is not required.
Yes, ma'am.
It's not required unless you go one day. And if you go one day, then you're required to go to kindergarten, which is kind of an unusual rule, but it still is. But I know that however many students that we have in North County that want to attend kindergarten, we make provisions for them to attend kindergarten. But not so necessarily in pre-K.
No, ma'am, we do not.
And pre-K, you know, it has been my experience in working with the 3 and 4-year-olds and the first graders is something that possibly we should focus on. And even to the point of, you know, addressing it for this upcoming school year, because those kids are sitting out there, you know, and they're not, you know, I mean, they're starting out a year behind the ones that go to pre-K and then move on to kindergarten.
Yes, ma'am. And we have a waiting list. We almost perpetually, there's a waiting list, so that tells me that there's always enough children to at least add another class. And I think that is something that we need to think about moving forward, because we know the kids who've been through pre-K, they've come to school in a structured setting. They've learned how to line up and go to lunch and have breakfast and have recess and do academic-oriented activities as well as social activities, interacting with their fellow students. And we do see that helps prepare children for kindergarten. And as I referenced earlier, that's an area where we face some challenges with making sure our students in kindergarten are getting that strong foundation, and that is so critical to their future success. I think the investment made there pays off for our 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th graders and beyond.
Do we track where those kids go that are on our waiting list for pre-K? Are the parents making other arrangements for them to go to somebody?
They're probably in
pre-K?
private, yes, sir, they're probably in a private pre-K, or there's some state-funded pre-K in the county, but we think that kids who come through this system and through our program are well prepared for going forward. The things that are being done in the K-2 school and the 3-5 school, professional learning communities for our teachers, collaborating to improve instruction, assessment of the students and their progress in learning, those things go on in pre-K. And that is a good foundation for helping our students down the road. And I believe it's something we should consider. One of the challenges we have is space. We currently have filled up our buildings here that house pre-K. We have one class that meets in Lee Primary School because there's not room here for that class. So that was certainly something the board would need to weigh in on as we move forward with that.
Do we have any estimates to how many kids we're missing? How many classes we would need to add to fill the demand?
Well, I think we can add one more for sure, and I don't know beyond that. I'd have to talk to Ms. Brim, the director. I do know that when we start kindergarten, we talked about projections for staffing. Mr. Kelly, he has a statistical formula he uses, but we don't really know.
Right.
Because I know other superintendents, and in their system, they go down and get the hospital records and look at the birth rate for this year, and they estimate their kindergarten. We can't do that. We don't have a hospital yet, and so we don't have that luxury. So really, we don't know from year to year what type of projection we're going to have in kindergarten. Now, I think we've addressed that with some cushion there, so that when the numbers do come in, but that doesn't take care of the pre-K. And I think expanding pre-K would give us a better idea of who we're gonna have transition into our Kitchen primary and mini primary school.
You said they base it based on birth records from the hospital?
Well, that's another superintendent I know does that, but we.
Phoebe won't share the information with
Well,
parents?
sure,
or is that-
but they're all of Southwest Georgia.
So many counties.
Right, and so we.
But I would imagine they could do it by county, by lead.
They could, but it would not be as reliable a predictor, I don't believe.
People
because-
move after they're born.
Right.
Well,
We have-
I agree that pre-K is a vital part of preparing kids for school.
So whatever we can do to make that happen, we certainly need to put that on the agenda for discussion for priorities. Yes,
Each year, 240 kids become about 400 kids in kindergarten. And so, I mean, there's at least 160 out there, one somewhere.
And how many classes is that? 160.
Well, it's
What's the
20
classes?
divided by
It's,
20.
8. At least 8. 8 would be a big class.
some don't.
There's some parents who don't want their kids in pre-K.
True.
Yeah, that
They
is
don't
true.
send them to 40.
That's true, and they're not, like Ms. Ford said, they're not required by law. They're not required to go to kindergarten either. That used to happen, people used to show up in first grade, and unfortunately or first grade age, that doesn't occur anymore. My hope would be that one day in our state, pre-K would be like kindergarten is now. When I was growing up, I went to kindergarten in the basement of the Methodist church half a day, because it wasn't a requirement in Georgia at that time. I had a gentleman in my office last week, and he was in the 11th grade the year they added a senior year, so when he used to just go through grade 11, and then he was in that year, so he had to go another year, and like his friends before him. So I think the state realizes the value of this. I do believe, and Ms. Ford has some really good experience because she's involved with our early learning program, working with our 3-year-olds. They meet at the library.
Literally.
Yes, literally, and they're getting some good instruction. Ms. Ford and many of our other retired teachers are contributing to that, but I think the need is very real to make sure that we're preparing our children for the future. And that pays off in that slide that we saw, those kids off at college doing well in the world. They have a strong foundation, so they've been very successful. To provide that for more children would be a wonderful thing.
Do we track how many kids that graduate go to college? Do we
Yes.
know that?
Yes, sir.
How far out in college did we track them, or did we track any to see how
I would-
successful they
Couple
were?
years.
Yeah.
It's a couple of years. The SLDS, the statewide data, statewide longitudinal data system, it will show you a high school feedback form, which basically goes, I can't remember if it's the second year in college, but it'll also tell you, like the graduates of, say, 2014, they'll tell you at this point what percentage of those graduates have bachelor's degrees, what percent of them have associates, or what percent of them have, what percentage are still in school. I mean, it'll kind of give you a breakdown of how many of your graduates are, enrolled in college or in the tech school or whatever.
In the state of Georgia, does it track it?
Yeah, the issue with it is that most of the percentages they get a little skewed sometimes because you have kids going out of state, especially we have several kids that go out of state. So that used to skew the data, but they have gotten better about sharing data with other states. So that has, now I haven't seen it in several months, but I know within the last year or so, they've been sharing more and more data, so they're getting a more accurate picture. Kids that go out of state are now counting. So.
And you're right, Ms. Van, they don't want to turn loose of those little 4-year-olds.
And they're doing things with it at home. I mean,
They
some
do.
parents feel like they're able to do, and they are.
They are, but there's a lot.
Who don't.
I teach 3-year-olds, and I'm amazed at the 3-year-olds in my class who, by the time they turn 4, don't know how to grip a pencil, don't know how to cut,
transportation seems to be a big issue with any particular group, even with this 4-year-old program. I mean, if you can send a bus out, the kids will come, but it's hard for parents in some of these rural areas to get them, all the way, and even to the literate leave program.
All right, any other questions about Miller for that? All right. Mr. Dowling has some
Speaking of data.
hot topics for us.
Yeah, hot topics. So we basically, as you know, about this time of the year, we always do our calendar committee, and we have a good representation of teachers and leaders and parents from all levels. Matter of fact, we even had representatives from food service, transportation, maintenance, had folks from just about every walk of life as far as our school system goes, talk about the calendar. So what we did is we came up with 3 different options. Now the options are very similar. The things that are common about the options, and I think Dr. Miller put this in an email to you all. All the options start with pre-planning on August the 1st. All of the options have an entire week off at Thanksgiving. All of the options, and I believe, all 3 of these options end before Memorial Day. So those are things that it's just things that traditionally we have done. It's things that are, the week of Thanksgiving is a thing that our folks, they do not take that away from them. They are adamant about their week of Thanksgiving. And and I've talked about this before, but I truly believe that what happened was back when the economy tanked and we were furloughed, we were furloughed for several years, we were able to put in several breaks here and there, because if you're only working 174 days on a 180-day school year, we got 6 days to play with. So they popped in a break in October, put in a 2-day break in October. I remember going to Disney World that year, Got a 2-day break in October, another day in February, we had breaks all over the place. Well, when the economy got better, we went back to 180 days, people still wanted the breaks, but there's not nearly the breaks to be had. So you have to try to squeeze everything in. Now, there is also talk of a group trying to drop a bill, putting guardrails in place, and I spent the last 24 hours at Gale up in Athens. I just came home tonight for this meeting, but most of the talk up there is, and they pretty much said it outright, it has not passed yet. Anything like this has not passed yet. Most of the people up there, most of the educational leaders, most of the people speaking were against it. It just, one of the people made a very good point, and that was, if you're going to start in late August, how are you going to finish your semester in December when colleges finish their semester? We're trying to be like the colleges, or, that's one of the things that they mentioned, having a schedule more like the colleges, and our start dates and end dates they don't coincide. Colleges get theirs done a little bit quicker than what school systems do. So, but anyway, regardless, if that happens, if that goes through, and if that passes, then we'll adjust, we'll get back together, and we'll readjust and do what we need to do. So what we did, basically, getting into this, we gave them 3 options. And the 3 options, like I said, they all had certain things together, but what they had a little different was, had to do mostly with Christmas break, with January, and you'll see the options are different here. So option A gave a longer Christmas break. Now, it did not give the breaks. You don't have a day off in February, you don't have a day off in October. You have work days, but you don't have a day off. You don't have a break day, okay?
Teachers
Yeah, teachers, yeah. Students have that day, but teachers do not, okay? And that was the first option. The second option, you see, we pulled the day back, so teachers would go back and work this day, students would come back this day, but it allowed one of these mini breaks to happen. And I just randomly placed it in February. I didn't have to, but either February or October. That was one of the questions you'll see. And then the third option, option C, gave them their mini breaks, but it gave them their mini breaks at a cost of everybody goes back on January 2nd now, and the kids come back on the 3rd. And obviously that was the option that the teachers did not vote for. Now I say this, if you look at the circle graphs here, and basically option A won out in this first round. I call this the first round because we didn't have a clear majority, so we're going to have a runoff, just like a political election. So So we're gonna have a runoff because nobody had over 50%, okay? I have a feeling that option B, I don't know this, I'm prognosticating here, but I have a feeling option B is probably going to overtake option A because the people who didn't get option C are gonna say, well, I at least want 1 day off. You know, you're not gonna give me too many breaks, give me at least one, so. But we'll see, I mean, I'm gonna send that back out to them tomorrow and say, okay, you didn't want option C, you have choice between option A and B. So looking at the answers here that they gave us, first preference was option A, 44 to 35, but option B had, or option C had 20%. Second choice was clearly option B, which makes me think, like I said, if it comes down to A and B, it might be really interesting. I asked them if you chose choice B, and I'll ask this again to get a clearer picture, but if you chose choice B with the one holiday, which holiday would you take, October or February? And it was reasonably close, but most wanted October. Some folks use the reasoning of, well, February gets into testing season, we really, you know, we don't, if I gotta have a choice, I'd rather have the day there to get stuff done. And then I ask this question every few years. I asked this a few years ago, and you know, basically, is your preference to plan spring break to coincide with spring breaks in other systems, or would you rather have it remain the first full week in April? And overwhelmingly, it was first full week in April. Now I say that, and I say that some of the comments here, and I left some of the comments here that pertain to parts of the calendar. Some of the comments here say, I think we should have the same break as, you know, the folks around us. We share kids, we share, you know, churches share kids, and, you know, and we did try that a couple of years ago. But it did put our spring break into that last week. That was kind of last week in March, first week of April, and we had a lot of our constituents just thought that was a little bit too early. So, but in any regard, what we're going to do next is basically have them vote between A and B, and then we'll have a choice, and what we'll do with that choice, you know, again, listening to you, of course, but we'll give you what they came up with as their choice in February.
Do you ever even look at how much it costs, how much more it costs us to have school in August? I know that Johnny Golden could speak on that.
Yeah, he
a lot
could.
more.
And I understand that, but the other, what I will argue with is, do you offset that with, if we start school here, and we're having to come back to school here and have exams here, how much time are we reviewing the kids, and how much time are we catching them after, you know, this is not a clean break. If you start any later, you're gonna have a really hard time finishing before Christmas. And so that semester, you know, again, thinking high school, final exams. Now, we did this when I was a kid. I mean, we did this, okay? So I'm not saying it can't be done. We've done it. And if the state comes up with their ruling putting guardrails in effect and makes us start later, then we're not going to have a choice, okay? So we've done it before. The problem is, what ends up happening is when you come back from Christmas, the first few days are spent getting the kids back, getting their brains working again. And then you have days before the final exam where you're now reviewing for final exams. So the efficiency is a little bit less there. Plus, the kids that are in dual enrollment, they're finishing in December as well, and now you're not finishing until January. So there's an offset there that you have to deal with.
Now, you do have 91 days in the first semester.
Yep.
And 89 in the second on option A.
Mm-hmm. But that's, I mean, it's hard to get 90-90.
I know it is now, but how high couldn't it be 88, 90?
I mean, you can do 88-92. You could, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
And you could start later.
Yeah, but now you're only.
With the colleges, a lot of colleges don't begin until September.
No, most of them start in August now.
They do, okay.
As a matter of fact, my daughter went back this year, August the 10th or 11th, I think.
Okay.
I think that's what that was, the guardrails when I was reading.
Mm-hmm.
The guardrails are considered finishing up the year, so if you've got a student that is required to start a school in summer, they consider and build that into it as far as graduating high school and being able to get.
Well, that's the problem.
That's
That's one of the big problems. See, right now, I mean, we've had kids the last couple of years that, you know, that week of graduation, a lot of times seniors finish up right at the beginning of that week or right at the end of last week. And they're actually taking a couple of summer classes during that week before graduation. So, you know, colleges are, they're pushing back their stuff, you know, more and more. So, you know, what it used to be in the old days, you could finish in June and colleges didn't start until about the second week of June and they do their June, July and blah, blah, blah. Well, now colleges are starting to push their summers back into May. Schools are starting to finish earlier and earlier in May.
Doing a full summer
Mhm.
semester or mini
Yeah.
semester one,
In the May
or both.
semester.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's more and more students that want to, they want to finish high school and get started. They want to go. They want to get going. They don't, because they're already taking dual enrollment classes. So or they're taking AP classes, so they're already seeing that college material. So they don't want to. There are more and more kids that don't want that senior college summer to go, do whatever before you go off to college. They're going. They're going.
Any other questions?
I'll just say, add to that, we get calls beginning in January from parents and grandparents wanting to know the next year's calendar because they're trying to
Booking a cruise.
book a cruise or a
Or
trip somewhere,
campgrounds.
and they're
My
very,
next door neighbor.
very anxious. And I know at least one of the private schools in our area, they try to align with what we do as a school system. Their headmaster and I communicate, and they do try to follow what we do. It's always been a little bit of a tug of war between Doherty and Lee because they traditionally do the last week of March, but our teachers, we did that one year, and but our teachers, they prefer, as Kevin said, very much that first week of April. And the one year I think we had a really late Easter that year, so.
There's a lot of other people that say put spring break around Easter. I'm going, well, if you do, it's going to be April the 20th. I mean, these last couple of years we have had a very late. This year's Easter is after my mother-in-law's birthday, which to us that's like, because my mother-in-law's birthday is April 18th.
But that fluctuates, man.
It does,
could be
it
early
does.
April,
Right.
late April.
Right.
But the problem is that if you put spring break that late, now we're right in the middle of testing.
Right.
So,
And that is something to consider as well as when the spring break falls. So we will take the votes and then Mr. Dowling will bring a recommendation to the board for your consideration.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Dallin. Next item on the agenda is Dr. Miller's discussion of the Lee County Education Foundation.
I know we're going paperless, but I did want to give you a certificate of incorporation. It's, we filed for this last year, and we did not receive it until May. The purpose of a foundation is so that we can create a 501c3 that people could make contributions or donations to the school system and receive a tax credit. Education foundations exist to serve the students and the teachers of the system, to provide another avenue to bless them, another source of funding. We are a society, it seems every athlete, every entertainer has their own foundation. Many wonderful foundations serving many needs. But there's actually, I read somewhere that there's more than 100,000 foundations in the United States, but less than 10,000 that are of the type that we're talking about that serve a school system. Lowndes County Schools has a foundation, and Forsyth County Schools has a foundation. So we contacted Lowndes, and the gentleman who got that off the ground for them, talking to Wes Taylor, he directed me to him, and we were able to get some good information about this process. We worked with the Butler Snow law firm out of Macon to do the articles of incorporation, prepare the foundation to help us get this off the ground. Last Thursday, January 17th, two Thursdays ago, we had our organizational meeting. We have 5 directors on the board. Dr. Larry Walters, our retired superintendent, Ms. Patsy Shirley with Lee Family Connection, and then 3 alumni, Mr. Jamie Knight, he's a banker with Synovus and a Lee County parent, and Ms. Kelly Robertson, Ms. Kelly Haggerty, when I was her teacher and coach many years ago, and she works for the United Methodist Church and she's on the board. And then Ms. Courtney Greenway, who's a teacher at Lee County 9th grade. According to the bylaws and talking with our attorney, we can have 7 members of the board, and if this would probably be a good opportunity to have one of you represented on the school foundation board. We also have another position that we could fill. We have an idea of what we want to do there. We have a lot to do, but this, I believe, has great potential. And potentially, we could have us, what we'd like to do is create a corpus, a body, and raise enough money so that we could use the interest only off of that corpus to make donations or contributions, whether it's a scholarship or if a teacher had a need, like kind of like Ms. Ford, Ms. Mann may be familiar with the Junior League scholarship that they provide teachers. I think Mr. Holt got one of those recently. It's a $500. You make an application for a need. Dr. Walters shared with in the organizational meeting in the system he worked in Alabama, Decatur City Schools. They had a foundation, and he said that the elementary teachers all wanted a carpet with the world map on it, and so they would write a application to the foundation, and then they would have a celebration and give that out. A lot of potential here. You think about a person who maybe passes away and their family wants to make a memorial to help a child out. I know that has recently happened with a family in our school system. And I think this would be a vehicle that would serve that purpose, but also be another avenue to help other students. There are a lot of possibilities, I think, here that we could look at. Payroll deduction, if an employee wanted to make a contribution, they could certainly do that. That's very common with systems that have foundations, memorials or legacies, like I've discussed. We could potentially do solicitation of donations by going out to organizations in the community and asking them would they be willing to contribute some money to the foundation. So we think this is potentially very powerful. My hope for it is like that verse in Mark says, the mustard seed is the smallest seed that becomes the biggest plant. And so we already have a $1,000 donation from a law firm in Albany, as you know about that. And so we've got that seed. Now we just need to grow it. And I want to answer any questions that the board may have about this.
Does the foundation have a stated mission and purpose so that when people do contribute, they would know exactly what they're contributing?
It is part of the Articles of Incorporation, but that's more general. I think we may need to be more purposeful, maybe develop like a mission
Well,
statement.
but there could be campaigns within the foundation for different things. But
Right.
yeah.
Tell me about how much discussion has been had on how the funds are gonna be accounted for? I'm saying this is gonna be fund accounting or?
It would be separate from the school system.
But
And
who are you keeping the books? Who's gonna do that?
typically, and what I know goes on in other school systems is they actually end up hiring someone to oversee the foundation and to make solicit funding, but also to oversee the books.
The tax returns and all have to be filed.
I mean, you're an infant. You're gonna start the foundation with board of directors, and then you're gonna branch off into committees, I would imagine, when your purpose. I mean, there's a huge potential there.
Yes, and we certainly, I don't think we're gonna build a new high school or do something like that with the money we get, but if we could provide some scholarships for our students, or we always are having needs. Things come up. I don't know if you remember, was it last year or 2 years ago, one of a group of students won a chance to go to Kansas City to compete, and all of a sudden they had to get money for hotels and a trip out there. I think the foundation could potentially serve that. I hope we'll have some very clear guidelines. I don't think any of the money should in any way be directed towards athletics. I think we do a good job of reaching out to our community on those. It's nothing against athletics, but if we could keep it focused on academic needs or opportunities for teachers and students,
But
especially students.
What if you had a donor that wanted to come in and make a large?
Well, if they wanna make a large donation, we will,
Then be designated.
we will.
I think you're gonna have to have some part of that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think you got too much.
But,
you got too
but that
much.
could be, I mean, we
just make it one
never
small.
say never, but we would certainly wanna, if somebody wanted to bless us with a gift, we would certainly try to. Now, we would have to have some guidelines, I think, because we don't wanna say, well, this is only for the 3rd grade class at this school, or this, you know, we'd have to be careful about that, because I don't think that's the spirit of what this is. We are gonna meet again at the end of next month for our 2nd meeting. Our plans are to meet, pretty regularly up until we can get this going. Some school foundations hire a marketing group to go out and do the fundraising. I don't see that happening with us for now, but that could be something down the road. But I believe this is something that would really bless our school system.
So were you asking us for a representative for that board?
Yes, sir. If the board would, you don't have to do that tonight, but if you would consider having one of your number to serve on that board, that would be excellent. And as I said, I think we have a person in mind for that other spot that I think everyone will be pleased and proud of. So,
I would assume we're taking diversity in mind. when we
yes,
look
sir.
at it.
Yes, sir.
I'd love to be part of it, just for the record.
Just have to come to some meetings and help us get out there and raise some money. And, but we could have. We had so many ideas. Just the group of us sitting in the room the other day. We could have an alumni association. We don't have
Exactly.
one. You could pay $10 and join it, and we have a Facebook page, and you can find out what class of '87 is doing, or we could take. We're always working with graduation groups. Their reunions coming up, and they want to use the cafeteria or the multi-purpose room. We could, work that some way where, okay, you can do that. We want this, if you'll make a donation here, they probably would. I'm not saying that's the best idea, but it's an idea. Something I've always thought that we need in this community, we've not had one that I know of, is we have the distinguished alumni. That I don't know if we could tie that with this. I just got an email last week from another system about how do we do that. We want to start that. They heard about what that group has done. So I think there's lots of opportunities. It's going to take a lot of work. I believe we can do that.
The charitable contribution designation 501c3 will serve us well for individual contributions. I know things like corporate contributions to the Touchdown Club and those kind of things are corporate expenses that are tax deductible. But individual contributions to other needs within the school, not so much. So it might enhance some of the, if you kind of want to incorporate some of the.
So you can flip back the receipt on that. You can flip back the receipts on, take away the ambiguity
Right.
if you're pulled.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Hearing none, we have to do
I move that we go into executive session to discuss and deliberate upon the employment compensation, hiring, the disciplinary action or dismissal, or periodic evaluation or grading of a public officer or employee to interview applicants for the position of superintendent, and to review an appeal from a student disciplinary tribunal or use hearing officer or panel.
We have a motion to go into executive session. Is there a second? We have a second. discussion, we'll vote. All those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? We will not take up any further action after this meeting, other than make our decision in the tribunal.
Right.
I think if you wanna see the video, we're gonna have to go. Well, this can't be on video. So we'll probably need to have.
Doing this phenomenal, get responses, but, 4 times a year, the utility companies look at the high state, June, July, August, and September. I would bet